Hey everybody, welcome to Freethought in Florida. Freethought in Florida is a production of the atheist community of Polk County, a Florida nonprofit. I'm Sara Ray, that's my wife Becca, in the co-host chair.
Hello.
We have been chatting with some of the speakers scheduled to appear at Free Flow this year. That's the Freethought Florida Conference in Orlando in November. Monica Miller from the American Humanist Association, Gina Duncan with Equality Florida. I have Sara Gillooly with the Americans United for Separation of Church and State lined up to talk to later today, actually.
Very cool.
And Bertha Vasquez from the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, all on a future show. So that gives you an idea of some of the folks, the talent that we have appearing at Free Flow. In addition to local and national organization representatives, we also have some, would I say, some of the more well-known larger figures in the larger atheist community. And one of them is here with us today. Holy shit, it's Seth Andrews.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for letting me come and play along.
Hey, we appreciate you doing this. Welcome.
You bet. You bet.
Seth Andrews, host of the Thinking Atheist podcast. We appreciate you taking some time away from decorating your yard to...
Yeah, it's that time of year. You know, Halloween is something that I've always enjoyed, even back when I was a believer. But, you know, now that I'm not worried about Satan and dark spirits and demons and, you know, there is no satanic panic in my life at all. It's sort of like the restraints have come off. And now every year we do the whole thing with skeletons, and I've got floodlights, and I've got the flaming light bulbs on all of the coach lights outside, and I've got a fog machine and a laser floor, and we just do it upright. And the neighbors so far haven't kicked us out. So, but no, it's a fun time of year. Plus, I'm glad the temps are dropping. I don't know about where you are, but
yeah, Florida is just surface of the sun hot all year round.
It's just been like 90 degrees October 1st is just stupid.
Yes,
and so finally we got a cool breeze in, and now it's almost time for long sleeves and sweaters and pumpkin pie and hot chocolate, and so I'm delighted that fall is here.
Are you an apple cider guy?
I can do apple cider, you bet. You bet, yeah. A good hot cider on a cold day. And Natalie is not a fan. My wife is not a fan at all. She's like, we're going to lose the sun. It's going to be darkness for 6 months. It's so depressing.
Well, let me tell you, as somebody who moved down here from Illinois, 11, 12 years ago now it's been?
Something like that, yeah.
People used to ask me, don't you miss the seasons? And for the first few years, no, I don't miss seasons. Are you kidding? This is beautiful.
Then you hit 40 and you go, oh.
Now I miss the seasons.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice to have them from time to, I'm not a fan of 103 degrees in the summertime, but it's nice to have a little variety.
So has Linus got his fall wardrobe lined up yet?
We'll probably dress him out. We have a down jacket and we have sweaters, and Linus is my little 6-pound rescue dog that he has his own webpage. If you go to sethandrews.com, you'll actually see that I've got a whole ton of photographs and video of this dog that we rescued back in February of this year. He will not be coming with me to Free Flow. But he says hi and he sends his love. He's actually asleep in my lap as I'm not going to interrupt him here if he gets up, I'll hold him up to the camera.
Mine's under the chair right now, chewing on the leg of the chair.
She's brought me the tennis ball quite a few times. When you see me doing this,
they're unofficial co-hosts, the mascots sort of thing.
Exactly. Everybody loves the dogs.
Yeah.
And speaking of spooky season, of course, if you enjoy the spooky season, pick up Seth's audiobook, Ghost Stories. I love the annual broadcast.
$20 for that one. Thank you.
I'll send you the bill.
It's funny. I've done 460 some podcasts, which for me is a lot, especially if you're, just a single host of a show. And you can only say there's no evidence for any God anywhere so many times in so many different ways, and you become desperate to talk about other things. And, we've gotten into everything from cults and, We've talked about the Satanic Temple and their fight to protect the church-state line, and we get into the psychology of belief. We've gotten into sexuality. We just did a show on polyamory, and I'm trying to really sort of broaden things out so that we as free thinkers, critical thinkers, can get beyond the debunking Noah's Ark stories and talk about a variety of different things. But sometimes it's nice just to go completely off topic. And so starting many years ago, I, in October, did a Ghost Stories broadcast where we sort of lower the lights and sit around the virtual campfire and we tell stories. And then I began capping the show with an original work, which is a lot of work. It's a lot of time to do, but people really seem to respond to it. And then I had compiled enough information and enough production and produced a bunch of extra stuff in the background that I've put together a 4-hour audiobook that's available at audible.com and iTunes called Seth Andrews Ghost Stories. And it's, it's one of those things that just gets you in the spirit.
Yeah.
And I want to be a storyteller. I think we're a movement that needs storytellers. So, whether we're talking about the serious issues or whether we're doing, I do a show called My Date with Google or the weirdest websites in the world or something, whatever that is, I want to be a storyteller. So hopefully that comes across in the audiobooks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a ghost in your microphone.
I think there is a ghost in it today. Yeah, I can hear it.
It's the work of the devil. He knows what we're up to here.
So let's back up a little bit. It's hard to imagine that there's anybody left out there that doesn't know who you are. But for those people, maybe give us a quick Reader's Digest version of who Seth Andrews is. Well,
I'm in the atheist movement, and good luck defining that. But, I've done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of conventions and the broadcast is popular and whatnot. But outside of that microcosm, very few people have any clue who I am, and nor should they. But I'm a former evangelical Christian. I was true blue believer. I was the product of religious parents. They were hardcore fundamentalist, Bible literalist believers who met at Oral Roberts University. They got married, I think, in the university, one of the chapels, I think.
Wow.
They honeymooned in Jerusalem. My mother wrote a Greek New Testament study guide. They are theologian-level believers, and we were raised in the cradle of that. Christian school and Christian music and Christian friends and Christian apparel and Christian everything. We just never knew any different.
Oh, yeah.
And, inherited worldviews, this is very common. Was it Dawkins who said in his book, The God Delusion, he was talking about the two most common denominators when it came to religious belief, family and geography, right? Where were you born? What was the religion of your parents? And this was the case for me. And I was always kind of a communicator. I was a student leader. I was a big mouth. I had an excess of personality kind of a thing. And that led me into a career in Christian radio. I started in 1990 at KXOJ 100.9 FM and sort of graduated up through the ranks. I did 14 years in FM radio in my home city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, before becoming a video producer. And I walked away from my religion when I was about 37, after an intense search, and decided, well, maybe there's a need for a broadcaster, storyteller, radio host like me in the atheist movement. And so I started the podcast in 2010, and we had just about 1,000 listeners. And to date, we've been downloaded more than 50 million times around the world. It's pretty exciting. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well,
in a fortune cookie.
You mentioned sort of that storyteller and communicator, and there are some pieces of that story that I think really sort of transcend, whatever the topic is, whatever the interests are. I have here an article from Tulsa World dated March 2000, celebrating the 10-year anniversary of KXOJ superstar Seth Andrews, and I thought it might be fun to take a little walk down memory lane.
Yeah, do it. I'd be curious to see what it says. I'm sure I saw the article.
I'm sure you did.
But I can't really remember the content of it.
That's great. These are your quotes. So first, you were talking about doing the show with Jim Marbles and about not taking yourselves too seriously. You said, we come in, we laugh, we crack each other up. If someone makes a mistake, we don't get nervous or try to cover it up. We just tell the audience, guess what Jim just did? He spilled coffee all over himself. Then we'll laugh and the phones begin to ring. People have connected with us because, for better or worse, we're real and they have taken us into their family. And on connecting with listeners, you said people write letters all the time saying they were listening to the show and heard the right song at the right time, or they were having a lousy morning. They needed to laugh and we made them laugh. It's very humbling to receive that kind of correspondence. You don't get that many places. And I thought it was sort of interesting, 20 some years later, you really do kind of get that in more places than you might have expected back then. And so it really does sort of transcend.
What was the date of the article? Because I left KXOJ in 1999.
Oh, that might have been it.
So it must have been right there at the end.
Yeah.
97, 98, 99, something like that. Blast from my past. Well, there are some aspects, more than video, radio is an intimate medium. It is, you're not talking to 50,000 people. You're talking to one person 50,000 different times. One person who is, they have you on as they get ready for work in the morning as part of their routine, or they're driving in on a commute, or they're out for a morning walk or a jog, or they're working out at the gym, or running errands, or cleaning house, or whatnot. And so radio becomes this conduit where you are just one-on-one into this part of their lives. And especially in talk radio, when you get a chance to actually sort of flesh things out, you're not just playing 15 songs an hour and you got to rush, but you can actually talk about things. People get to know you beyond just your personality. They get to know your family members. They get to know your story, the funny things that happened to you, the things that moved you. And even now as a broadcaster, as an atheist, I look back and I miss a lot of those people from my Christian radio days. We were very much a family unit. They weren't the pejoratives that so many people toss out when they talk about religious people being dumb or mentally ill or whatever. They were precious people. They were lovely people. They were in many ways like a family to me. We had a tremendous bond. And so I didn't, my path has led me elsewhere, but I still have a real affection for a lot of those people, and I miss them. I miss the times that we had at the events, the concerts, etc.
Yeah, so, absolutely. But again, like those connections that you talked about back then, that's the same kind of stuff that you're getting still today. People send you emails
it's
left
interesting.
and right.
When I left video, I thought for sure I'd never get a chance to be a broadcaster like this again. I didn't know what a podcast was,
Yeah.
So in 2004, I left Clear Channel and turned in my resignation and said, thank you so much for the opportunity. But FM radio was a shrinking business. A lot of computers were replacing people's jobs. I didn't want to be next on the block. And so I just decided I'm going to evolve my career into video production, which is what I did. And I did that for 10 years.
That was something you talked about in this write-up too, was the automation of the radio industry. And it sounded like I was sort of getting into radio at about the time you were getting out. Like one of my earliest jobs in radio was a weekend overnight board op. And all I was doing was monitoring the new automation system to make sure that it didn't screw up. And if it did, I had to be ready to go live, and that was it. And then from there, I moved into talk radio on our, we had the #1 morning show in the Central Illinois market, and year after year after year. And so I thought one of the things that I sort of connected with you and your show on early was some of these parallels in our journeys. And for me, that was a very much conservative indoctrination. After our morning show, we had Rush Limbaugh and Dr. Laura Schlesinger and G. Gordon Liddy and Mike Gallagher and Sean Hannity. I mean, the who's who of conservative radio, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I could talk for hours about.
No, we had those same hosts here, and I used to be a big follower. It was Rush Limbaugh, who played midday. I love your little dog's bark, by the way. It reminds me a little bit of Linus. Like small dogs don't know they're small.
No.
Right.
You know, it's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog.
Aww.
Anyway, that's the saying I've heard. You know, it was Michael Savage. You know, there's a toxic guy right there. I remember G. Gordon Liddy had a talk show. Yeah, I remember that. Sean Hannity, 3 hours a day, every day is all we ask.
I had God, what was that? Art Bell overnights. We had Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
Art Bell was a conspirator. For those who don't know who Art Bell is, he was this legendary host of Coast to Coast, which was an overnight show that was wacky. And I, to this day, don't think Art Bell actually believed any of it. I think he was just a savvy businessman and knew that this was his brand.
Yep.
But he would bring people on to talk about crazy stuff, you know, like Area 51 and the alien cover-up and just wackadoodle stuff that they would do. And that's what Coast to Coast was. It was like a bad sci-fi thing played as fact. And I always heard, now this is subjective, who knows what's going on really, was it going on in his mind, but I always thought he knew it was all a show. This is a circus and I'm just going to cash in and call it a day. Who knows for sure. But yeah, I mean, that was a whole culture, that AM radio, talk radio culture. And it's interesting, it's largely even today dominated by the evangelical right. The most popular ones are these Rush Limbaugh types, who I consider among them, even though I don't think he's actually a believer. If he believes in God, it's probably himself, kind of a thing. But, you know, the Sean Hannitys and the Mark Levins and all of these, they tend to appeal, that brand of radio tends to appeal to a specific type of demographic. And they and the Fox News culture, there seems to be a tremendous sort of a crossover there, you know.
Oh, yeah. I was big into Fox News when I worked in that. And I was a dumb 19-year-old kid. That was my shtick on the shows. I was this dumb kid that didn't know anything, didn't see the importance and the value of voting. And they gave me a good run over all the time.
I listened to Rush Limbaugh every day, and I listened to back when Glenn Beck was doing his shtick, and I never really once stopped to consider my own mind. Like, it took me coming out of religion in my 30s before I actually went back to discover what I thought about the things that mattered. I had inherited my parents were William F. Buckley conservatives, then Ronald Reagan conservatives, today Fox News conservatives. And I had just always thought, well, that's who we are. And yes, of course it's right. But I didn't know any Democrats. I didn't speak to people who were not evangelical Republicans. I wasn't presented with contrary points of view. And I had lazily sort of inherited this mantle and passed it off as my own. I'd convinced myself that, yeah, this is what I really do think. And once I came out of the sort of cocoon of religion, I remember going case by case through all the different things that I used to think. I was pro-death penalty, and I had to reevaluate that. And I was anti-gay marriage, and I had to reevaluate that. And the abortion question, I had to reevaluate that. And it was just the legalization of drugs. It was just one thing after the other. And I realized how much religion had informed what I thought about the world. And once you take that baggage away, and you got to go back to square one and do your homework and reassess, and everything, for me, everything changed. And so, in a family of hardcore evangelicals, I'm sort of this heathen liberal. In their mind, I might as well, I might as well be, I might as well live on another planet. They just don't get it. They're not listening. So
I often wonder, what would have happened if I had stayed back there? I mean, I'm from a town of 1,400 people. I have a high school graduating class of 32. Real small town, corn, soybeans, right? Rural Midwest. And there was an interesting article from, I believe it was the managing editor or executive of crack.com during the 2016 election that talked about how the Trump phenomenon is so much about rural versus urban, that there's so much wrapped up in that. And he grew up like not far from where I did. So it really kind of hit home. And I think to myself, my God, had I stayed there, I mean, I think coming down here and, Orlando, we're not in Orlando. It's a good hour drive to Orlando from here, but there is this liberal queer rainbow bubble around, or we have Disney and Universal, and so much of it is entertainment, and it's okay to be gay here, right? So it was sort of easier for me. Definitely would have been impossible for me to come out and transition back home. I couldn't even imagine. But every once in a while, I think to myself, what would it have been like if I'd stayed? And I miss radio. I miss doing this thing. And that's why we started our podcast. And that's why we do this show. Just kind of gives me my fix. So the other day, I tuned in to my old morning show. It's the Byers and Company morning show on News Talk 1340 WSOY AM Decatur. And they were talking about, this is crazy. It's like time stopped in this place. They were talking about the Illinois legislature had passed a bill permitting recreational marijuana, but each district would have to thumbs up or thumbs down, right? So your unincorporated county, each city, everybody got their own say as to whether they were going to permit dispensaries and all of that stuff, right? And so there had been a city council meeting, and all he could talk about was these people that showed up that were pro recreational marijuana, getting up to the stand and being like, "It's just a plant, man. There's nothing wrong with pot, dude. Everything's cool." And I thought to myself, yeah, that would have been me had I stayed. He even brought up, while I was there, and this was early 2000s, a ban on leaf burning that had come before the city. And there was a whole group of people in our community that came out and, it's my God-given right to burn my leaves in my yard if I want to. And if that kid next door has asthma, well, then he can just burn, because I'm going to burn my leaves. And the hell with that kid next door. And it's my right as these are a lot of the same people. Time seems to have stopped in this place.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a lot of the same arguments, just translated from decade to decade, and a lot of it's based in fear. Oh, yeah. Fear of the other. Fear of the other, I think, is the big one. It's a tremendously toxic form of tribalism, where we find reasons to cordon ourselves off. It's us versus them. And then, as they did with those people behind the podium, they speak about them in derogatory ways. They are different. They have different ideas. Hey, point our fingers and look at them. And then we sort of solidify our superiority in the tribe. And it's, it's something I've been talking about here as I've been speaking on the road more and more about how we as a tribal species are becoming even now more and more a species of mobs in the age of the internet. We, in the Twitterverse, it's everybody's always piling on. Everybody's shouting and screaming and finding reasons to cordon ourselves off behind these little lines. And we have a small group of people that are like us, and then there's everybody else. And I lament it. I get weary of how quickly we divide it. And the minute you say something like, we should try to find opportunities to be kinder and to learn about other people and to have dialogue and spend time with those who are different and have different opinions. When you say that, people either equate kindness with weakness, or they scream about something in the extremes. Well, I'm not going to be kind to Nazis, and I'm like, whoa, that escalated quickly. I'm not saying we have to go out and be kind to our ideological enemies in every case, but overall, I see I've never seen a country more divided. I've never seen a culture more divided. I, in 51 years of being alive, have never been aware of divisions like I am now, and I'm scared. I'm scared about what it means for us. We're divided even within our subgroups. And then there are subgroups of those subgroups, and we're all splintering all the time. And I'd like to see us restore our own humanity and not be so afraid of those who don't fit inside our little bubble,
Yeah. So let's switch over and talk to about free flow a little bit. What can we expect from Seth Andrews' costume at the Cocktails and Costumes party?
Well, I haven't decided yet. You know, I'm an 80s child, and so I thought, well, the mullet makes a lot of sense. You know, the mullet and the sock tie and the high collars and the Dexter shoes. But I don't know. I'm not sure how I'd pull that off. Then, or I could go 70s. You know, 70s are always a fun decade. I mean, I was a 10-year-old in the 70s, but still. But I'm going to think about it. The last time we did a costume party, it was, I'm trying to remember the theme, but I showed up as a Catholic priest.
Oh, God.
And it's interesting, too, because when you wear that uniform, people who don't know that you're in costume treat you way differently. I was walking through the hotel and people were like, hey, what's going on? They're all having a good time on a Friday night. And then they saw me and then they just went, and they just drew into themselves. One person asked if someone had died in the hotel, and that's why I was there. They were nervous that someone had passed away, and you know, I'm thinking maybe their spirit looms. Who knows? Someone else asked me if I married people, like what could I do a wedding, and I had to tell them, I'm in costume. I'm going to a party. I'm not really a priest. But I became very acutely aware of how people treat, with deference usually, those people who are wearing the collar. Oh, yeah. And I think that's kind of sad. I mean, they're just people, and it's just a position. And it also shows you the power that people in the clergy have. They can walk into an environment, and even among the non-religious, the attitudes change, become muted, deferential, weird, you know. So I was a priest. It was fun. This year, I don't know. I'll make a decision probably in the next week or so.
Well, if you need something that requires very little planning, might I suggest Bob Saget?
I can come as Bob Saget without doing a thing, apparently, which I hate.
I don't see it.
People say I look like Bob Saget. I can't stand Bob Saget. I can't stand Bob Saget. The most unfunny comedian, the most uncomfortably unfunny comedian ever. Oh, I've heard that, and Ferris Bueller. I've heard that one. So,
okay,
for what it's worth.
So, what can we expect from your talk then? What's the topic of the presentation this time?
Well, it has a lot to do with what I mentioned just a few minutes ago about tribes. I did a presentation last year that talked about the difference between having information and enough information to have perspective.
We were there.
Sometimes, especially on Twitter, we see something in 280 characters and we see that and we run with it. You know, how many people have we known? Maybe it's us. We shared a link that was not rooted in the facts, or maybe it was only part of the story. It was factual to a degree, but we didn't have enough facts to give us perspective. And then we use those things as excuses to further divide ourselves. And so I'm going through some very specific stories about instances, both individual and with public figures, where we had some information and then we just immediately jumped to the worst case scenario. We found excuses to divide and to discount instead of to unite and even forgive. And I talk about how even people who are extremists out there, some of the most toxic extremists in the world, may not be beyond hope. They may not be beyond help. There may be an opportunity for us to break through. You know, they're victims of bad ideas. Sure, they're promoting bad ideas, but they're also their lives are wasted too. And I would much rather, whenever possible, and it's not always possible, I'd much rather try to create and cultivate an ally than to defeat an enemy. Sometimes you have to defeat the enemy. But if possible, wouldn't it be nice to try to create and cultivate an ally? And I'm going to give some examples of where this has actually happened. And extremists have walked away from their extreme points of view and committed themselves to a better life. I'm an encourager. I want to encourage people that it is possible and that, you know, we should continue to be vigilant rather, in the business of trying to change minds out there, including our own. So,
yeah, and that makes me think of a topic that seems to be on all of our minds in the secular circles right now, which is, you know, outrage culture, cancel culture, this rage quit phenomenon. And, you know, like we can agree on 99% of things, but you disagree with me on one thing. Well, fuck you. I'm going to burn the house down. You're trash. We're throwing you out of the community. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that's affected the atheist movement, if there is such a thing. But just this past year or so, we had the Sargon MythCon thing. We had the atheist community of Austin's barn fire over the rationality rules and the trans sports thing. And there's a temptation to just immediately cast these people off out of the village without having any facts, really, or just preliminary facts. And if you suggest for the moment that, you know, I'm going to reserve my judgment until I hear more about this, well, then you can go too. And so,
yeah, and that's it's interesting how we tend to take like a sledgehammer to situations that require the X-Acto knife, you know. Everybody who is accused of something is not Harvey Weinstein, you know, and yet we have to assess based on the evidence and merit and you know, the nature of the accusations and all those things, whatever they may be, what's credible, what is not, and what the consequences should be. And these are different, I think, for everyone. And we as creatures of you know, of fairness and justice, I think, need to be prepared to separate ourselves from the toxic elements that have contaminated or damaged the movement and have done some very damaging things in their own lives, and to speak out against it. I think that's natural and necessary. I also think that we have to be able to assess one from another. And if the evidence is not there, or if the, you know, we see genuine penitence and repentance, for lack of a better word, to offer a path, to create a path for redemption so that someone can perhaps recommit themselves. If it's the type of mistake that is made, you know, that might warrant a second look and a path to redemption. I'm all about redemption. Not everybody can get there, but you know, these are case-by-case instances. They are moment-by-moment, case-by-case, individual-by-individual instances that must be assessed, and they must be assessed responsibly and thoughtfully. And that's not going to happen in a Twitter feed.
Sure.
And those people who see an accusation come out and immediately jump into a camp for or against, set them free, burn them down. I think they're cheating the individual issues that we have to be assessing. I think we must be more thoughtful than that. And forgive the long-winded answer. It's just one of those things where I think that, you know, life's messy. These situations are messy. There are some genuinely toxic people who have done some genuinely toxic things in this movement. We have to be prepared to assess that and say, you know, this is a necessary expulsion from a movement I care about, because they don't represent what we do. We have to separate ourselves, I think, to a degree. But at the same time, I think we don't take a blanket approach and say everybody who's ever screwed up in their life is out forever, permanently branded the Scarlet A, whatever, on their lapel. And we watch their attitude and response, and when necessary and appropriate, offer a path to redemption, so that perhaps there might be a second chance in their life. That's not popular to say. But,
right. Oh, of course. Well, and there's a sort of flip side to that coin, too, which is on the topic of ideas rather than people. So we've had, even in our own local community here, you know, we've had to sort of make the case that to remind people that the atheist community of Polk County is the in-person experience. Yes, we have a Facebook page and a Facebook group and a Twitter and a Meetup and all of the things, but those are tools to get us together in person, and that is the community experience. In that, so we started just as a small Facebook group, and that quickly sort of grew and formed the 501c nonprofit and all of those things. But we've had people come into that group who who are atheist, or identify as a non-believer, but yet they don't quite snap into what some people might think of as the generic non-believer, right? So if you plot us all on a graph, there's probably a grouping on one end of the spectrum or another on a lot of issues, right? We're probably mostly all not real solid on the death penalty. We're probably all in favor of allowing women to make decisions about their own health care. And so when someone comes into the group that doesn't fit into those specific things, like we had somebody who was anti-abortion, we had somebody else who was an anti-vaxxer, and then we had to put the clamp down on political posts because by and large, the people in our group are left leaning, and when a Trump supporter comes in, and so what we saw happen was the dog pile of all of these people on this new person who's just coming in to find community, to try to find like-minded individuals. And if we can set that stuff aside for the moment and just try to connect and work together on the issues that matter, church-state separation, right? Then maybe that opens the door to having a conversation about these other issues that, maybe there's a religious motivator that you haven't gotten rid of yet. When you walked away from your faith, is the reason why you're hanging on to your views of abortion come from your religious upbringing? But we don't even get to have those conversations because the minute they walk through the door, we slam it. And so as a local community organizer, that's something that we really feel. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, a difference in philosophy, and people care passionately about these things, and these are the things that matter, and our emotions run high and our convictions are strong, and I think as the online communication in this way sometimes cheats us. We treat each other differently on the internet than we would if we were sitting together over coffee. And I've had to make a commitment in my own life to draw back just a little bit from social media and to always remember there is a flesh and blood, three-dimensional human being who is typing those sentences. They have a background and a history that I do not know. They have a personality that I'm not really familiar with. And unless they're just being abusive, to try to, whenever possible, give them the benefit of the doubt and to approach them with kindness, to try to, the word I like to use is de-escalate. I try to find opportunities where everybody else is like, oh, yeah, well, screw you. Oh, yeah, you're an idiot. What kind of a dumbass would ever say that? And everybody's piling on, to jump in and say, whoa, 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 let's take a breath, everybody. We're all friends here. I try to use the word friends. We're all acting in a friendly way, or we should be. Let's relax and try to create a moment where connection might be made. And then if we disagree, even about the things that matter, we don't have to leave. We can be ideological adversaries, but we don't have to be enemies. And I think that's different too, by the way. A philosophical difference or a difference of opinion is different than someone who's acted in an untoward way. And you simply have to separate yourself from them. That's another, if you have somebody acting in an untoward way and it damages the movement, that's different than someone has an opinion that you disagree with. And that's another complex conversation, probably a whole other podcast, But
well, we appreciate what you do with the Thinking Atheist podcast, and
thank you.
And like young Christian broadcaster Seth Andrews said, you are just a real dude, and you're out there creating important connections, and we've definitely taken you into the family. So,
and the dog has too, and that makes me so happy. I just feel like more fuzzy, furry family members I've gotten. Hey, Linus, you want to say hi, pal? Come here. Here, I'll give you a quick look. He's hard to see against the black shirt. He's my little rescue. He's 6 pounds. We got him on Valentine's Day of this year. He is, we think, multi-poo, but we have no idea. Who knows what all's in there. He's Heinz 57. And he has just been one of the best little guys in our life. He came into our home in a critical time after we lost a couple of pets, and he's been amazing. So people have been really sweet and kind, and so little barks, and life's better when you have a little bark in the background, you know. So thank you guys for letting me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
this one gets annoying sometime. There's some chihuahua in there in the mix.
Do the chihuahuas, are they the ones who have like the nervous energy, or is that is that it?
Yeah.
But they're fiercely loyal, and they're funny, and you know, I've heard good things about the chihuahua. So.
Well, our friends have a Yorkie, and our 9-year-old son, who struggles with ADHD and some anxiety stuff, we dog sat for them one time while they were on vacation, and just the way this child changed in the presence of a dog, I was very resistant. We just had built a new house, and I don't want a dog to come in here and, you know, piss on the carpet and tear things up. Well, we don't need all that. And then we can't go on vacation. What are we going to do with the dog when we go on trips? And so I was resistant until I saw our son with this dog. And then it was like, well, I guess we're getting a dog. But they
make it impossible to say no.
He wanted a Yorkie just like this one. And this one's like a full-bred teacup Yorkie size.
Like it's 3 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what we ended up with.
No.
Well,
but you get what you get.
Yeah, and we love her. She's good. Yep.
Well, I'm excited about Florida Freethought. You know, I do a lot of conventions, and I'm not lying. It is one of my favorite events of the year. It's one or every 2 years for Free Flow, but you know, there were a few that are just major for me that I always like. When Imagine No Religion has a conference, that's always been a tremendous experience. And I always have a great time at the American Atheist Convention. And Free Flow is, you know, something special. There's something special about the tone, the attitudes of everybody there, the goodwill. There's a family thing. It's personal. It's always fun. There's a ton of personality to the event. And I just can't wait. So, you know, whenever I'm asked to come and participate again, I don't even blink. Yes. Okay, great. I'll see you. You know, what's the date? Okay, no problem. Just send me the details later, but write me in ink, and I would like to be a part of it. And I think that attendees will feel the same way. If they go, they'll notice there's a tremendous sense of family community. You will learn things while you're laughing and smiling and connecting. And we as human beings need that. I think we are better off together. And Free Flow does together very, very well. So I'm looking forward to it.
We can't wait. This will be our first year, and it's going to be a good time.
Going to be a really good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person there.
All right, Seth. Well, thanks for hanging out with us today, and say hi to Natalie, give Linus a belly rub, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
It shall be done. Thank you very much.
All right. Make sure you go to thethinkingatheist.com and subscribe on whatever podcast player that you happen to use. Check out SethAndrews.com to learn more about the man himself. Seth Andrews, host of the Thinking Atheist podcast. He'll be with us at Free Flow, the Florida Freethought Conference, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2019 at the Holiday Inn, Orlando International Airport. Friday night, we've got the cocktails and costumes party. I don't know what we're going to do yet. We haven't discussed this.
No. But you know what? There's like Halloween costumes available right now. I bet I could find us
something real good.
Yeah.
Saturday night, we've got dinner with comedian Devin Siebold, who is here from Polk County. He's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, all of his stuff is great. He's going to be funny.
He, how did I describe him? He's kind of a mix of liberal redneck Trey Crowder
and Jury the Principal.
And Jury the Principal. Yeah. He did a bit about parents during the Hurricane Dorian that never was, that didn't happen. That's just absolutely hilarious. And the Orlando Gay Chorus will be there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Saturday and Sunday, we have all the speakers on the lineup and workshops during the day, exhibitors set up throughout the whole thing. Go to freeflow.org right now to register. That's freeflo.org. Register today. And as always, if you want to learn more about the atheist community of Polk County and the things that we do here, you can go to polkatheists.org. We post all of our events on Facebook and Meetup. If you want to come out and do a social event with us, or we do a roadway cleanup every other week. That's a lot of fun and doing good out there in the community. And every month we have a educational speaker series at the library in Lake Wales. You do not have to be an atheist or a member to come and hang out with us. Just come out and have a good time. I'm going to record now with Sara Gillooly, and that'll be on the next episode of Freethought in Florida. We'll see you then. Hey, what's up? I'm Sara Ray with the atheist community of Polk County. I'm stoked to be the MC for this year's Free Flow, the Freethought Florida Conference.
Orlando, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The whole weekend is going to be groovy.
I'll be rapping about separation of church and state.
I'll be talking about what might have made America great.
And I will be tripping. No, I will not be doing any tripping.
I'll be talking about the role of science in secular humanism.
Evolution education.
Community organizing and activism.
Transgender equality in America today.
Americans' attitudes toward, wait for it,
agnostics.
I'll be giving the skinny on how summer camp can help build a secular community for kids.
Science education here in the Sunshine State.
Black feminism, free thought, and progressive politics.
You can get your groove on at the Friday night cocktail party.
Friday night cocktails and costumes party, which kicks off the weekend.
We're going to lay down that funky music until we die.
Costumes are optional, but at least some disco will be mandatory.
I personally won't be there unless there's disco.
Join me and hundreds of other science enthusiasts,
atheists, secular humanists,
heretics,
feminists,
skeptics,
nonbelievers,
Satanists,
and freaky freethinkers.
Tickets are at freeflow.org. That's freeflo.org.
So do me a solid and register today at freeflow.org.
Catch you on the flip side.
They should let me write these.